record this. And then let me.
There were attachments?
There were attachments. You didn't. You giving me grief.
It was.
No, that's me? Me? No.
There was homework.
Yeah, well,
Huh?
it wasn't really homework. It's stuff we're going to go through tonight, but I basically decided how I would do this is how I've done it in the past with some of my youth groups and stuff. And so I don't know if that's, I don't know, I think it might be easier for Mike. He might be able to follow along better. I don't know.
Where did you have these attachments?
The bottom of the email. I'm going to share my screen too, so that we have that stuff on here too. But so what we're going to be doing over the next 3 weeks, these 3 Mondays, is we're going to be looking at those 3 days that we tend to ignore within Holy Week: Holy Monday, Holy Tuesday, and Spy Wednesday. And our reading for today is kind of brief, and it's one that we've probably heard a few times. Then next Monday, it's going to be a lot more. There's a lot more text that could be looked at. I'm probably going to pay attention to just a few of them, but it's the Tuesday of Holy Week. If you look at the Gospel of Mark, and its timeline is a lot. Like there's a lot of things that happen just in that one day. And then Wednesday seems to go back to just a couple of things, but the 2 attachments, Mike, if you found them, did you find them?
What I have is February 23rd, everything Zoom. Zoom
Okay.
Phone 101 and Zoom Webinars 101. I don't have
Okay.
these.
Okay. Well, that's why I'm sharing my screen, just in case. But with the attachments, and they were sent in the email, but I can resend them again. But one of them was a Holy Week timeline that is part of the Gospel of Mark, and we'll touch on that for just a little bit. But that's more of the homework side, Wendy, just if you're wondering, for folks to have just to look. And then the other one was the study for tonight, and then there will be, again, for next week, there will be a similar set of attachments. But before we begin with our reading, why don't we open with prayer? And I'm going to read this prayer that I have at the top of the study sheet that actually comes from the Book of Common Prayer, and it's the one that is read on the second Sunday of Advent. And I like to read this when I begin some studies with youth to try and focus them in what it is that we're going to be looking at. But let us pray. Blessed Lord, who has caused all holy scriptures to be written for our learning, grant that we may in such wise hear them, read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest them, that by patience and comfort of thy holy word we may embrace and ever hold fast the blessed hope of everlasting life, which thou hast given us in our Savior Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I love that prayer, and it's a wonderful prayer that they use for that Sunday, which is a Sunday that tends to take a look at, in their lectionary anyways, tends to take a look at the power of the Word and the Word being made flesh and all that stuff during Advent. So we'll have that as the beginning of our study over these next three Monday nights. But our opening session, our opening question starts with something to try and make you think a little bit as we start looking at Jesus and his reaction in Mark chapter 11. But have you ever had your expectations dashed by expecting to see or experience or find a particular thing and have it not be there? And if so, what was that like? I can think of, for instance, when my wife and I were on our honeymoon, we went to the zoo at Duluth, and it was not a very happy zoo. I thought zoo, and I'm like, yes, zoo, and then you go there, and it's like, this is kind of a little heartbreaking. I don't know.
Caged animals?
Yeah, chain link fences, and that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that kind of, but that was also 20 something years ago, 22 years ago, long time ago. So it may have changed by now. I don't know. Maybe they don't even, maybe the zoo's closed. I don't know. But that was a time in which I kind of had this expectation of seeing something because I heard the word zoo and I had a picture in my head of a particular thing. And I was just kind of, But how about anybody else?
Always.
Always?
Yeah.
Tom?
I can't come up with an experience, but yeah, I'm sure
Haven't you ever given someone a gift and you expected them to fawn all over it and they said,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like when grandparents buy their grandkids this great birthday present when they're like
Yeah.
2 years old of a great toy, and then all they want to do is play at the box.
Like that.
Yeah, that's how it works, right? Well, it can be kind of depressing, I think, when you're like, get all your hopes up, and then you get there and you're like, dude, seriously? Or you run it through your mind of how great, well, yeah, like Mike, like how someone is totally going to be just overjoyed with what you did, and they're just kind of like, great, thanks, see you later.
That's it. That's it.
That's all you got?
That's it. Christmases can be that way.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, this is kind of what happens with Jesus here in Mark 11 on the Monday after Palm Sunday. But we're not going to necessarily take a look at the Holy Week timeline. I do have it here, and it breaks it down a little bit. I tried to include time before Palm Sunday, which included a lot of sort of the decision that he makes that it's time to head towards Jerusalem, towards the reason why I came. And then it includes some interesting encounters. Some of the ones that we don't have in Mark that we could throw in here would be like, he travels through Jericho in Mark 10. Well, that's probably where he runs into Zacchaeus there in Luke chapter 16, right? Or 18, I think it is. But then also we hear nothing about Saturday, the Saturday before Palm Sunday. Well, it was the Sabbath, right? You're not supposed to be traveling or doing much on the Sabbath. So you don't hear much about that. And then we have Palm Sunday and Holy Monday, which we'll be looking at the cursing of a fig tree and the cleansing of the temple. And then if you look here, Holy Tuesday, you can see there's so much that happens, a lot of teaching. One of the big parts is the entire chapter of 12 is him teaching and interacting with the religious leaders. And then Mark 13 is him teaching his disciples about basically the end times. And then Spy Wednesday is when Judas decides, okay, it's time to get things rolling here. I'm gonna turn on my bro. And then of course Maundy Thursday, which is the whole time of both the preparation for the Passover and the Passover meal, and then the betrayal of Jesus and Peter denying Jesus. Good Friday, of course. Silent Saturday, that was something that I just learned this last week, that there's some churches that call it Silent Saturday because there's nothing. He's in the tomb. I thought that was an interesting moniker to give. And then, of course, we have Easter morning, which Mark is interesting because most scholars say that the Gospel of Mark ended at Mark 16, verse 8. And then the longer ending includes a bunch of the appearances of Jesus that we see in other places, like the disciples on the road to Emmaus. It's only 2 verses, but it's there in Mark, and then the Ascension as well. But we'll be looking at Holy Monday tonight. And so I'm going to go ahead and read for you Mark 11, 12 through 14. If you have your Bibles with you, you can follow along with me. Otherwise, I will move up here to the top of the screen so that we have the text in front of us. But reading from my Bible here in front of me, on the following day, when they came from Bethany, he was hungry, that is Jesus. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to see whether perhaps he would find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. He said to it, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard it. It's a very brief interaction that Jesus has on his way to the temple, but he's hungry. He's wanting to break the fast. Maybe he didn't get his Cinnabon or anything that morning, and so he went out looking for some for something to eat. But why does it say? And I normally include fill in the blanks for my youth. But why did Jesus go to the fig tree?
He was hungry.
Verse 12 tells us he was hungry. Yep. And then verse 13, what does it say in verse 13? He went to
A fig tree in full leaf, like
Yeah.
it should have had. It was promising.
yeah,
It looked.
went- yeah. He went to see if he could find anything on it. And what did he find on it in verse 13?
Only leaves.
Yeah, he found nothing. Absolutely nothing. I had to look it up because I didn't know this because I'm not a master gardener.
Yeah.
But the season for figs in Palestine, maybe Mike, you know this, is June to November.
Absolutely.
And I looked it up, and it actually said that in March and April they would be coming to their full leafage, I guess, in a way, but they would not be growing figs, which I thought was weird because I thought normally the fruit would come rather quickly after the leaves, but maybe I'm wrong. But one of the big questions I've always had when you read this story, and we're looking at number 6 here at the bottom of this page, but if Jesus is the Son of God, the Word that created all things, so the thing that God spoke at the beginning when he said, "Let there be light," that was Jesus as the Word, wouldn't he have known that it wasn't the season for figs? Why did he go looking anyways?
Positive mental attitude.
Okay. Positive mental attitude, that could work.
I didn't like this story because it seems to me to be kind of vengeful.
Vengeful, yeah.
It says that there were only leaves. My version says there were only leaves because it was too early in the season for fruit.
Yeah.
As you just stated, but that's what I got read here. So it's like, how can you then curse it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like he's the 2-year-old in the grocery store that mom won't let have a Snickers, right?
Yeah,
Or
ride that pony.
I think Jesus is showing a little bit of a human side there, isn't he?
Yeah, in some ways. Yeah, I always sit there and I look at, well, he was hungry.
Yeah, he was hungry and disappointed that he couldn't find a fig,
Yeah.
and reacting as we might react if
Mm-hmm.
didn't get our way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this picture of his humanity, but then it sort of leaves you with, well, if he would know that it's not the season for figs, then in part maybe there's something more to the story, which we'll maybe see a little bit later. But he curses the fig tree. Like if
Yeah.
he didn't find figs on it, you'd think, oh, I'm gonna go check the other tree. No, there's nothing here. Maybe there's a date palm somewhere. Maybe I can find a date palm, or maybe there's some key limes that I could find for some key lime pie. I don't know. Go and find something. But instead, yeah, it's almost like he's throwing a temper tantrum, right?
Yeah.
Like he's just like, no one is ever going to eat from you again. And he curses the tree.
Which probably carried some weight because he's the Son of God.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, I don't want him to be my judge.
Well, and then why does it include at the end of verse 14? I'm just wondering, why do they include, and his disciples heard this? Like, it's just this brief little statement, and it kind of gets given away with what we'll look at next week, but it just says, and his disciples heard this, as though, I guess maybe he said it rather emphatically, that it wasn't under his breath, that he made sure that everybody knew exactly what he was going to do.
This was a demonstrable
Yeah.
fit.
That it wasn't sarcasm.
Mm,
It was,
no.
you know, he was,
See if I ever talk to you again.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, now we move on to the second part of what happens on that Monday, and it's kind of a big deal. But verse 15 through 19. Then they came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple and began to drive out those who were selling and those who were buying in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. He was teaching and saying, is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations? But you have made it a den of robbers. And when the chief priests and the scribes heard it, they kept looking for a way to kill him, for they were afraid of him, because the whole crowd was spellbound by his teaching. And when evening came, Jesus and his disciples went out of the city. And the big question, our number one question was, why does Jesus clear the temple now? Like, it's the week he's going to die. He's been to Jerusalem, who knows how many times, had plenty of opportunities to open up a can, and he doesn't until right now. Why does he choose right now to do that?
Is he flipping the switch?
Maybe.
Is
Yeah.
he encouraging, well, this time has come now, so I'm going to have to push him a little bit?
Yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
to finally bring the confrontation to the leaders full circle. Yeah.
He was already in a bad mood after the figs.
Yeah. He's hangry. He needed a Snickers. He's hangry. That's what you get. You don't feed your Jesus. He makes a whip and he clears the temple. So you got to feed your Jesus.
I guess. Which he could have made the rocks and the grapes or olives or whatever.
Yeah. But that's not what he came to do, right? No. Yeah, he had opportunities to clear the temple quite often, because he was in a lot of our gospel accounts. He's there in Jerusalem quite a number of times at the temple. He had an opportunity to do that, but he chooses it now.
This is the only time he did that?
As far as we know, yes. The only difference is that in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they record him cleansing the temple, clearing the temple at the end of his ministry, basically here during Holy Week. John actually puts it at the beginning of his ministry. And so there's some scholars that say he did it twice. There's others that say John is fiddling with the timeline because he has a different part of the story to tell, to tell us. But Matthew, Mark, and Luke all basically put it here on Holy Monday as the time when he is cleansing the temple. But he goes to the temple, though, and one of the things that he finds is this market. What was the market doing in the temple, do you think?
Probably offering everything that was clean and it had been kind of like koshered.
In some ways, yeah, probably, yeah. It was one-stop shopping, maybe. If you were on your way down to the temple and you need to make your sacrifices, but you didn't want to bring your sheep with you, oh, hey, stop on by Gus's Sacrifice Emporium. We have all the little sheep and doves you could ever need. Just stop on in.
And then
It-
wouldn't you assume that those were blessed by the Pharisees or
Priests.
the priests?
Yeah, they could be you'd have the right one, right? It was a big deal to have a pure sacrifice, a sheep or goat without blemish. So you'd be assured it would have that stamp of approval, right? The guarantee. So you would know. But he drives everybody out of the temple with the market. From what we understand, there was a market on the Mount of Olives right across from the temple where people on their way on pilgrimage could stop at that market and then go into the city and go to the temple. And the thinking is that at some point there around this time, Herod basically thought, well, that's kind of stupid. Why don't we just put it in the temple grounds? Because people are just coming to the temple anyways. Otherwise, then we have all the sheep and the goats making all the noise through the city and making a mess of our sidewalks. We got to send out the extra guys to clean up after them, all that stuff. We'll just put them in the temple grounds and be able to cut out the middleman, so to speak, that people have to stop at the market outside the city. Now they can just come into the city and spend their money in the city. But the market would make sure that yes, you had the clean animals, the animals that you would need for the sacrifice. But the problem is that the space that they put it in was the space for the Gentiles. The place that they put it in, because you would have in the temple grounds, you would have the temple building, which was small in comparison to the whole structure that Herod built. And then you'd have inner court that was built for the Jewish people. And then you'd have this outer court around it that would be for the Gentiles, as well as I think for the women. Sorry, Wendy. We wanted to make sure that we segregated everybody out properly. And so that's where they put this market, in this place where the nations were supposed to be praying. And so Jesus is not exactly happy about what they're doing, but he drives out the buyers and the sellers. They're just fulfilling the sacrificial obligations, right? They're providing what is needed for the sacrifice. But why is he driving these buyers and sellers that seem to be just doing what is necessary for the sacrificial system? Why does he drive them out of the temple?
According to his words, it has become a den of thieves.
Yeah.
But I see the marketplace as diluting the temple.
How so?
Well, it's not there for the worshiping. It's now there for buy my groceries while I'm there, or change my dinero for lira, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes diluted.
Yeah.
The temple carries less value
Yeah.
as a
in a way.
holy place, as where this is where my mind's supposed to be at.
Yeah. Yeah. In a way it does. It can become a distraction, right? It would be like in the narthex at church, setting up a table there where people would have to buy their bulletins and hymnals and a pass to go through the velvet rope that Mike would be standing at the doors of the church before they could enter, right? Like charging a cover fee for people to come into church. Although that wouldn't be too bad. That'd take care of the budgeting issues, I think, make sure everybody's putting money in the offering.
Might take care of the attendance issues
But in some ways, he's driving out the buyers and the sellers, because when you put those two words together, buyers and sellers, the first thing that comes to my mind is transactionalism, right? Like, you have something to sell, I want to buy it, so I create a transaction. We create a transaction together in which I have money, you have what I need, I buy it from you, we're good to go. He's driving out these buyers and these sellers, in part because what the temple was in some ways turning into was, or it had already become this, was a transactionalism type religion in which I do my thing and God's going to give me his thing. And that's just the way it's going to go. If I do this, God does that. If I am a good little boy, God's going to scratch my back, and so on and so forth. And so it was this trusting in, not in the God that was supposed to be present there at the temple, but trusting in going through the motions, going through the right transaction, to be able to make sure that we were fulfilling whatever our obligations might be. What was a money changer? You touched on that a little bit, Mike, but what's a money changer?
In today's terms, it's exchanging one currency for another.
Mhm.
And
What, Tom?
It could be changing money into a service or a product also.
I just assumed
No,
there were Roman money and Israel
Yep.
coin, something that they had to
Yep,
do.
very, very much so, yes. The temple tax that all males over the age, I want to say it's over the age of 20. I'd have to go and look that up again. You had to pay a temple tax. I think it was a shekel or half a shekel or something like that, which was a Jewish denomination. It was a denomination of Judea. It was a denomination of the temple, basically, something that would be maybe even manufactured there, minted there. Well, you'd have all these people coming, say you're a Jew who's living in Ephesus, and you're on your way, you make the trip down, the pilgrimage down to Jerusalem for the Passover. The money you have are Roman denarii, Roman drachmas, all sorts of things other than shekels. And so you show up to exchange your money. Well, have any of you ever exchanged foreign currency?
Yes, and you pay for it.
You do, don't you? Yeah, you pay a fee.
Yeah.
It's usually a percentage of some kind to be able to exchange dollars for euros or pounds or whatever. Well, you have people that have set up those tables right there in the temple complex where people are going to pray. And they're setting up their business to where, oh no, you can't give us that money, even though it's valued at the same amount. It's basically the same weight in silver. Because remember, prior to paper money, money's value was based on its weight in a particular precious metal, whether it be gold or silver or copper or whatever. Whereas, we manufacture our pennies out of zinc now. So, I don't know how much zinc is worth, but 1 cent, I don't know. And so it would be worth about the same, but it would be a way for someone to make money. It's kind of like the tax collectors, right, of the day, where the tax collectors would make their living off of charging more in taxes than what the people were supposed to spend, because they weren't getting a salary from Rome. They just collected the taxes and got them to Rome. And so they would have to steal money from people. You owe 10% of your field to the Roman government, but they ask for 12% or whatever. It's a similar issue, though, of turning what should be a place of prayer, refuge, worship, dedicated to God, and you're turning it into a place in which you're making demands on people, right? Yes, Mike, you in the back?
Thank you. You know, and there's a possibility too that these spaces were leased.
Could be, yeah.
You know, like if you want to go sell your wares at the Viking facility, you're going to pay some amount to the Met Council and maybe to the Vikings, et cetera.
Mhm.
Or if you're at the state fair, same thing.
Yeah.
You can't just show up.
Yeah. It's like a liquor license, right? You
Yeah.
get a license to be able to do a particular thing in a particular place. And if the government decides, no, you don't get to have one, then sorry.
I'm sure you could probably, in those days, you might have been able to set up on the street, but this, as you said, is not the street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, the next question, dealing there in verse 15, what's the significance of the seats of those who sold doves? What's the significance there? Why does that matter?
Uh, in my Bible, it said chairs of the, which I guess there's nothing special about them, just chairs, I would think.
Yeah,
Unless
Yeah.
it's like Wall Street, you buy your chair.
could be, yeah. Well, the
You
people
can't,
who would, go ahead, Mike.
no, I mean, you can't just go in there. You got to rent your space again or buy it.
Yeah.
And isn't doves, isn't that synonymous with peace? And so they're trying to sell you peace.
In a way, yes. The doves, if you remember correctly, when Joseph and Mary bring Jesus into the temple and they have to do the sacrifice of the purification, they bring 2 turtle doves. Well, what that says of Joseph and Mary is that they were poor. What was prescribed in the law was that doves were the minimal sacrifice for the people that were poor to be able to do their sacrificial duty. They can't afford a lamb. They can't afford a goat. They can't afford an ox or whatever. They get a turtle dove, and that gets to be their sacrifice to God. You're not gonna get much meat off of there because it would be an eating thing that would be part of the sacrificial system. And doves are kind of plentiful because they're basically like pigeons. They're rats with wings. But here he's turning over these seats because you have people that not only do you have the buyers and sellers of all the different sacrificial animals that people could bring, you have the money changers, but now you have people that specifically are selling the doves to the poor, which of course, the poor, either one, you could raise your own doves, I guess. That wouldn't take too much work and that wouldn't cost too much money. But there's this significance to he's wanting to overturn even the whole sacrificial system in a way, to sit here and say you're preying on people who have come to be reconciled, to find peace, as Mike's talking about, with God, to be reconciled through the sacrificial system. And who knows, maybe they're like the power companies in Texas right now charging people $15,000 for electricity, because they can. I don't know, maybe they were charging $15 a head for doves when they actually cost 5 cents. I don't know. But this significance of him not only driving out the market, clearing out the money changers, but also overturning the chairs, the tables of those who are going after even the least of these, who are just wanting to come and pray and fulfill their vows to God. There's a big significance there. And then verse 16, why would he not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple? I think Mark is the only one that actually has this in his account of the clearing of the temple, but it says that he wouldn't allow anyone to carry anything through the temple.
Is that his judgment? That's their fee? That, no, you're not taking your coin back. You're not taking your doves back.
Mhm.
You're not taking your lamps of oil or whatever. No, you're done.
Yeah,
This is the penalty I'm imposing.
yeah, that could definitely be the case. Um, there's also the temple complex, as I said, it was 35 acres. The space that it enclosed there, that included the outer gates or the outer courts and the inner courts and the building itself. There's this sense in which Jesus is invoking Sabbath law in the temple on a Monday, telling people, like going back to what you were talking about, Mike, with peace, the temple space should be this perpetual, continuous Sabbath, this perpetual, continuous rest, this perpetual, continuous space in which your burdens are lifted. You're not having to do the menial work that you normally have to do. You shouldn't be expecting your slaves or whoever to drive a whole herd of sheep into the market and have to sit there and take care of those sheep. All that stuff should be left to the outside world when you come to the temple for prayer, because they would have daily prayer and daily sacrifices. It should be a space that should be set aside as, well, like what most churches hopefully still call their sanctuary, a sanctuary, right? Some other denominations, Baptist mega churches and others, it's the worship center, or it's the venue, it's whatever. Whereas for most of us Lutheran churches, we still call it the sanctuary. It should be a space in which, for instance, the only time I get a little strict with the kids is that, number one, I explain to the boys they can't wear hats in church, but then people kids running in the sanctuary, I kind of go, okay, wait. This should be a different place than the hallway or the playground or whatever, to try and teach that. Well, here, in some ways, Jesus is invoking his power to be able to say, no, this is a Sabbath space. This is a space that people leave their burdens behind them and come in here and to be able to find rest, to be able to find wholeness. That's what I could find, anyways, of what I thought it in some ways represented. What do you guys think about that? Do you think that fits or no?
It would definitely seem to be appropriate. Yes. He wanted to keep the temple sacred,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, next, Jesus quotes them, and Mike touched on that a little bit. But first, his first quote that he has there, where he says, "He was teaching and saying, is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations?" And that's in verse 17. And that quote comes out of Isaiah 56, verse 7, where it says, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples, where it's a place. Verse 6 in Isaiah 56 says, "And the foreigners who join themselves to the Lord to minister to him, to love the name of the Lord and to be his servants, all who keep the Sabbath and do not profane it and hold fast my covenant. These I will bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. Thus says the Lord God, who gathers the outcasts of Israel. I will gather others to them besides those already gathered." Here he's hearkening back to this text from Isaiah, which I just love. I love because it's talking to us, right? Like Jesus is talking about us, because we're the Gentiles. We're the the other nations, the other peoples. And here Jesus is bringing this gospel text into it, saying this is supposed to be a space where you're not supposed to be carrying all your produce through that you're trying to sell out in the market. This is supposed to be a place for people to pray. But then he quotes from Jeremiah 7:11, which I always remember just because it reminds me of a Slurpee. 7-Eleven. Is that a Minnesota thing? I don't know. I know it's a California thing.
Up until about 20 years ago.
Oh, okay. So I'm just dating myself a little
They
bit.
got kicked out of the state. No, they left.
Okay. And when I was in California last time, I think the only 7-Eleven left in my hometown is right next to the Cal Poly campus, the college campus. It's the only one left in San Luis Obispo when there used to be about 7 of them. But Jeremiah, in his always snooty anger, he sits here and says, has this house, which is called by my name, become a den of robbers in your sight? You know, I too am watching, says the Lord. Where Jeremiah is just ripping into Israel and into Judah over this whole thing of what the temple has been turned into. And here Jesus is quoting this, saying that first of all, it's supposed to be a place of gospel, a place of rest, a place of Sabbath and prayer and the ingathering of the nations. And yet you've turned it into a den of thieves. What does he mean by a den of thieves? What does a den of thieves mean?
There isn't much lower than that. Next to the devil, I guess, a den of thieves.
Yeah. Well, what would thieves do in their den?
Plot.
What?
Plot.
Plot? Yeah.
P-L-O-T.
Fire.
It would
Plan
be
their next dubious deed.
Yeah. It would be a safe space for them, right?
Count up their shekels.
It would be a place for them to continue their criminal enterprise, so to speak. And here you have Jesus basically saying, you've turned the temple into a place where you can continue in your thieving ways, that you can continue and tearing down what it is that God has been making this place into. They've turned it into a place of security for themselves, a place of refuge for themselves, where they can continue to basically live out the transactional life where, oh no, you just got to make sure you get the right sheep, you do the right thing with the sheep, and you go home and everything will be fine. It's like that line from Slapshot, you go into the box, in 2 minutes you go free. You know, you go in there and you serve your penalty, and then you're good. Yes, Mike.
I got a question about that of the temple for all nations. Now you mentioned that the Jews have one place, the Gentiles another. So was this really like a omnibus temple? Like you might have yin and yang people there, and you might have Hare Krishnas, and because you've got the Jews and you've got the Gentiles, which is the precursor to the Christians, I guess, or everyone that isn't a Jew is a Gentile.
Yeah. Well, what happened with the exile, that the final exile, you have the first exile that happens with the northern tribes with Assyria, and they take a bunch of people off, and that sort of spreads the Jewish people around a little bit, the Israelite people anyways. And then you have the Jewish exile into Babylon, and with that came a whole huge diaspora of Jews around the world, including then that whole time between, I think it's 587 BC and to this point with Jesus. You have the Jews getting dispersed because of wars in Judea and all sorts of things. And what comes of that is that where the Jewish people go, and Mike just left, where the Jewish people go is they bring their religion with them. And their religion, their faith is a lived faith. It's something that is part of who they are. So they eat certain things and they eat them in a certain way, and they wear certain clothing, and they pray in a certain way, and they have a particular language. In many ways, they would be sort of like the Amish or the Hutterites, in the sense that they have a certain lifestyle that they live. And that would be distinct in a place like Ephesus or Philippi or Corinth or Rome or wherever. And what would come of that would be Jewish and Jewish interactions with the Gentiles, with Greeks and Romans and Ethiopians and all sorts of people who would then become proselytes. They would be converted to the Jewish faith, but they aren't necessarily Jews, in the sense that, for instance, if you're a dude, maybe you're not wanting to take that final step to become Jewish, if you know what I mean. And so you would still you would pray to God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You would try to hold to the Torah and all these things. And so that those outer courts would be the space made available for those folks who are, following the Jewish religion, but are not Jewish. And so it'd be a space for those who are praying to that God, but have not taken the step to become full members of the Jewish faith for one reason or another.
They mention that of all nations, and it's like, okay, it doesn't say of all religions, but you've made it clear that there's a couple different ones there. So I was just curious as to, Buddhist people there hanging out. I don't know. If they're
I would probably think not, only because it would be a space of prayer for those who are praying to the God of the temple there, to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And in most Buddhist understandings or expressions, God doesn't necessarily exist. It's more of a seeking after perfection for yourself. But
okay.
It's a good question. It's a very good question. Well, finally, we have the Jewish leaders, and they're kind of ticked off, right? Because it says they want to kill him. Why were the leaders looking for a way to kill Jesus? What does that mean? What were they seeking after? And that would be there in verse 18.
Yeah, they were afraid of him because the people were so amazed at his teaching. But what my Bible said, they saw how Jesus was having an effect on people. They were listening to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
He was so much more effective at preaching and teaching than they were. I think as part of their jealousy.
Yeah, he was rather popular, and you don't want to necessarily go after the popular person when you have that whole crowd there. But remember also too that they're under Roman rule, and they're wanting to avoid another riot, which would bring in more soldiers, which could end in more bloodshed and possibly the loss of their power. But yeah, they were, they were afraid of him because the whole crowd was the word that I have here in the NRSV, spellbound by his teaching. It almost gives this position of they weren't looking on their phones while he's talking. They weren't passing notes in class. They were in rapt attention to what it was that he was teaching. Well, a little bit of a wrap up to go back and take a look at how this fits within Holy Week. It says that back in verse 12, it talks about how he was hungry, that he was longing for something to eat. It gives this picture of Jesus as someone who has that longing, that desire. And it says that he went to see whether there was anything on the tree. Well, this whole picture of he went to see, it has many commentators long ago would interpret that as it's a picture of his incarnation, that he's come down to earth and he's come to seek after something, to find something. And the way Luther understood it, and even commentators today understand it, is that he's looking for faith. He's looking for the fruits of faith and the fruits of repentance. But it says that he found nothing, that there was nothing there, and which basically is a judgment in and of itself over the fact that Christ is coming looking for faith in his people, faith in his disciples. How many times does he have to tell the disciples, do you still not believe? Do you still not have faith? Where's your faith? All these things. And that whole issue of not the season for figs. That's part of the reason why earlier I said, I think when Mark includes this in here, it's not because maybe necessarily Jesus is having a temper tantrum. It's included in there because he's going to use it to teach. And we'll take a look at that next week, because the fig tree withers, and he uses that as a way to teach the disciples about something. But it's not the season for figs, meaning that he has come to look for this particular thing, and it's not there. It's not present there. It's this idea of, like we were talking about, this transactionalism where the leadership in the temple was removing faith from the context, and instead making it about, well, you just say the creed, you do the deed, things will be fine. And he's coming looking for this thing, and he does not find it. And so he curses the tree. He curses the tree. And cursing is, I included some text there that you can always look up on your own at another point. But cursing and barrenness, barrenness especially in the Old Testament, are always signs of judgment that's been brought upon ourselves, not necessarily that God comes down and rips away stuff so that we're barren because he takes it away from us, but our barrenness being a picture of our own judgment upon ourselves, of us lacking something. And in some ways, as we look at the temple, the clearing of the temple, and we'll talk more about that on next Monday, but the fig tree is kind of a stand-in for the temple in Israel. It's a stand-in in the sense that Christ comes looking for faith, and there's this image of faith there of the temple. It's supposed to be this place that is to be the focus of the faith of Israel, and to be driving it out, to be clearing people out of it, to be kicking them out of it, to basically begin the abolition of the temple. Because if you remember, when Christ dies on the cross, one of the big things that's reported, I believe in Matthew, is that the curtain in the temple that divided the Holy of Holies, the place where the Ark of the Covenant is, and just the holy place, which would be the place where they would be able to go in and put incense down, and the table with the bread of the presence and light the candles and all that stuff, that curtain that divided that was torn in two, so that the space, the Holy of Holies, was then sort of opened up for the world. Well, Jesus is here in clearing out the temple, is basically making this preparation to be able to say, the temple is not the space that you come to anymore. This temple is not going to be a place for transactionalism. It's not going to be a place where you throw in your faith, where the temple is not going to be synonymous with your religion or who you are. And this is nothing new. I included here Ezekiel, a couple of passages out of Ezekiel that I'll read here. But Ezekiel has all these visions. He's the dude who I think probably he smoked a little bit too many Bob Marley cigarettes, if you know what I mean, while while I'm praying. But here it says Ezekiel chapter 10, verses 15 through 22. The cherubim rose up, meaning those weird cherubim that have the wheels, and it's the throne of God, basically, that he sees. I think he has 3 visions of this. It says the cherubim rose up. These were the living creatures that I saw by the river Kibar. When the cherubim moved, the wheels moved beside them, and when the cherubim lifted up their wings to rise up from the earth, the wheels at their side did not veer. When they stopped, the others stopped, and when they rose up, the others rose up with them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in them. It's this picture of the glory of God, God's presence. And then it says in verse 18 of Ezekiel 10, then the glory of the Lord went out from the threshold of the house and stopped above the cherubim. The cherubim lifted up their wings and rose up from the earth in my sight as they went out with the wheels beside them. They stopped at the entrance of the east gate of the house of the Lord, and the glory of the God of Israel was above him. These were the living creatures that I saw underneath the God of Israel by the river Kibar, and I knew that they were cherubim. What he's picturing now, and this is at a time when the temple isn't destroyed yet. Babylon hasn't come to Jerusalem to destroy it yet. Ezekiel was one of the lucky ones that got taken out in the first exile because he was part of the priestly class. He would have been well educated, all these things. And what ends up happening is that Judah doesn't play nice. The Israelites don't play nice. Babylon comes back and destroys Jerusalem. But here he's railing against the leaders there, and he's talking about what is happening in the temple. And verse 11, beginning at chapter 11, beginning at verse 22, then the cherubim lifted up their wings with the wheels beside them, and the glory of the God of Israel was above them, and the glory of the Lord ascended from the middle of the city and stopped on the mountain east of the city. The Spirit lifted me up and brought me in a vision by the Spirit of God into Chaldea to the exiles, and the vision that I had seen left me. It was this picture of the glory of God, God's presence leaving the temple. And part of the symbolism of that for Ezekiel is he's there with the exiles. And the exiles, you got to be thinking, if you're the chosen people and you're now in exile and you're living in Babylon, you could feel completely lost. We've lost everything. We've lost the chosen city. We've lost the temple. We've lost our homes. We've probably lost family members who were killed by the Babylonians, all these things. And here, part of what Ezekiel talks about is the presence of God being with us wherever we are, especially in our sufferings. And it's this picture of, the glory of the Lord is not going to be present just in the temple anymore. The glory of the Lord is going to be everywhere and present with us. And so it gets removed from the temple. And in the same way, Jesus is wanting to sit here and say, no, you've turned this temple into something else. I want to clear things out so that it, at least for a moment, can be that space again before the curtain is torn and the glory of the Lord is shown to be for what he is, which is the God who gathers in all peoples. And it comes back to that question of idolatry that we have. Where does our faith lie? Where should it lie? Often we place it in the things that we do or whatnot. And yet Luther, I included the explanation of the first commandment in Luther's small catechism down here at the bottom, but we are to fear, love, and trust in God above all things, not in temples, not in cute little fluffy sheep or markets or anything like that, clean money, but instead in this God who is present with us. And so it's this beginning of Jesus starting to clear out all the things that will get in the way of Calvary, that will get in the way of the cross now being the focus of the work of God in the world. So that the temple, as we later find out, Jesus, he says, well, tear down this temple and I'll rebuild it in 3 days. And he says, well, he was talking about the temple of his body, saying that the temple now is not the focus, but it is Christ himself. And so the fig tree is going to play in more into this as we look at our next text for next week.
I like that fig tree parable better.
You like it better now?
I will.
You will?
Is what you're promising me?
I'm not going to promise you anything, Mike.
I want something to cling to.
Yeah,
Didn't like it.
you didn't like it, the
No.
hangry Jesus.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, next week we'll take a look at because verse 20 of chapter 11 of Mark begins in the morning, so it's Tuesday. As they passed by, they saw the fig tree withered away to its roots. We'll take a look at that a little bit, and we'll also take a look at a parable that Jesus gives to us. What I will end up doing here in the next day or two is I'll send this out again as an email in preparation for next Monday. That will include a similar write-up as this, plus the text that will be part of what is Tuesday, Holy Tuesday. What would be the chronology for us, to give a chance for people, for if you wish to read that on your own, because like I said, it's the rest of chapter 11, all of chapter 12, and all of chapter 13 that make up Tuesday. And we're not going to be able to cover all of that in a 1 hour study, but be an opportunity to take a look at some of the more important things. Any questions, doubts, fears, comments, concerns?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Echo that.
Yeah.
I'm beginning to see the symbolism of with the fig tree and actually the tearing down of the temple. And
Yeah. Yeah, it's those issues of judgment that Jesus brings often can be the difficult text for us to take a look at, because usually we want our Jesus to be soft and fluffy and cuddly and all those things, but many times he's not. And we have to kind of take the both and when we have our Jesus come to us, that he can be, well, like I said on Sunday, he can be the soft, fluffy Jesus with the lamb on his shoulders and bouncing the baby on his knee, but he's also capable of overturning tables and driving people out of temples. So, Wendy, did I put your dog to sleep?
She always,
Well, why don't I close us in a word of prayer as we go into this new week? It's weird to have it be on a Monday. I got to the office today and I was like, oh wait, I got to get ready for Bible study tonight. I don't have a couple of days because I've got to lead Holden evening prayer on Wednesday. But let us pray. Gracious God, we do thank you for Lent. We thank you for a time to take a look at these texts that we have before us that teach us about what you did for us and the life that Christ has lived and died and risen again for us. And we ask that you would help us to dig into the texts that we have, to read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest, to eat your word, that we might be able to grow in faith and love. In your name we pray. Amen. Well,
Amen.
you guys have a wonderful week. Hopefully I'll see some of you on Wednesday. I don't know.
I'll be there.
What time is Wednesday service at Faith?
6:30.
6:30.
Yep, all the
5,
services
Tom.
will be at 6:30.
5 o'clock, Tom.
5 o'clock.
I'll be there and gone, but you get there that way.
Yeah, well, when you're there, you can ask Carlton again.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna do the Gerasene demoniac, which I think will be interesting. Taking a look at some of these interactions that Jesus has, both parables and stories that are kind of parables for us that give us a different glimpse at some of the things that we have from Christ. But
You're expanding our vocabularies.
I try.
Gerasene demoniac.
Yeah. Gerasene demoniac. It's Pastor Carl's favorite, so he gets to teach on that. He gets to teach on that, and he gets to teach on what else? Zacchaeus and the prodigal son. I get to teach on the Good Samaritan and the rich man and Lazarus.
Well,
That
they're
one will
good.
be fun.
Yeah.
Rich man and Lazarus. Those two we're doing at Bethany, and the rich man and Lazarus and the Good Samaritan, and the rich man and Lazarus will be the Overton show as far as the skit is concerned.
Can we
Well,
all
well,
learn how to pronounce their names differently? Just
What?
call them O'Burtons.
Burton's. What are you
Yeah.
going like Irish or something on it?
Like Patty O'Furniture.
On that note, as we've jumped.
Good luck
the
on that.
shark.
Mike.
Yeah. Well, I hope you guys have a good week. And
You
we
too.
we